In this video, we're going to take a look at the blueprint for our character's head. And in its event graph, we have three sections. First, we will go to this section for face material. So, event tick. This happens every tick which is set to 0.04. If you set it to 0, it will happen every frame. We don't really need that, and this is enough. So we cast a first-person character, and based on character's health, we set its material and its wounded state variable. So first, if it's less than 0 or equal, then we check if wounded state is already 5. If it is, we don't really need to do anything, but if it's not, then we set the material to head W5, and we set the wounded state to 5. And the materials for the head you can find in first person character, character's head, materials. You can find the textures here. Okay, getting back. And then if we have less than 20, then we set wounded state to 4 and the material W4 and so on. So we start with 50 health by default. This means that this is less than 75. So we start with wounded state 2 and this material for the head. So when we get less health, when we get damaged and our health gets lower, we will get to one of these sections. The last one is when it's over 90, then we have the material with no blood and wounded state is 0. This variable is also used by the animation blueprint. We will take a look at it a bit later. Here on event begin play, we also cast to first person character, and we have this sequence, one for the invulnerability and one for berserk. And here we bind event to invulnerable. If we go back to our main blueprint, I did mention this, that here we call this invulnerable, and for the berserk we call berserk. And this is where we use this. We bind event to invulnerable, and here we use our material parameter value. So let's take a look at our mesh for the head. Here's our skeletal mesh, and it has a number of materials supplied. And we can see that element 5 is dedicated to the eyes. So here let's find the material. This is the material. Now this is used for invulnerability and this for the berserk. This blends the two materials in case we have both effects going on. And this parameter nullifies this nullifies the whole thing, and this will nullify the blinking. Same for the berserk. So here, blueprint head, we set scalar parameter value on materials. So on the materials for the head, we look for the value of invulnerability glow, which is only present in the eyes. Here it is. And by default, it is set to 0. So if we set it to 1, live preview, it'll become highlighted like this. This goes to the emissive color. So our emissive color becomes this. See, this is just a intensity multiplier, let's say. So it goes here and it's multiplied by this variable, and if it's 0, we get none. If it's 1, we've got the full value of this. And here we have this divide by period and sign for the blinking. So if we set this, it's 0 by default. If we set this to 1, and this to 0, then well, it's not animated here. Oh, it is. If you start rotating it, you can see it's blinking. So in the blueprint here, no, it's not. In the head blueprint, we first set the glow to 1, which is this, right? We set this to 1 first. It was 0 in the beginning. And then after a delay of the invulnerability duration, which we get from our first person character blueprint, -3, we set the glow to 0, and we set the blink to 1. So first this was set to 1, then after the duration of the invulnerability effect, -3 seconds, we set this back to 0 and this to 1, so it started blinking. And then after 3 seconds, we set this to 0 again. Same thing absolutely happens with the berserk. There is berserk glow. See, it's just the color that is used here by the emissive color. And if we set it to 1, we get this. If we set both, then this kind of takes priority. But then if it gets to 0, this is still in play. And then if this is blinking, you can see it's blinking to the red color, because this is still in play. And here also, if we set this back to 0 and this blink to 1, we will get the blinking effect of the red color. So the logic is the same. Here we are just checking this, the invulnerability duration, here the berserk duration, and we're using bind event to berserk, and it's the same. So now we can go to our animation blueprint for the head. Generally, I was trying to avoid animation blueprints to keep it as simple as possible, but this is the place where it was simply impossible to make it look good. And also it's nice that we have it so that you can figure it out and use it for other purposes. Also, it is used by default by the standard mannequin, and so it is used by our characters, and we will look at it later on. Animation blueprint for the head. Now we have the state machine, animation graph, state machine, and we have, well, it's here opened already, and we have the event graph. First, let's go to the event graph. Update animation. We cast to first person character, and we bind event on take any damage. And we have wound state, taking damage, taking lots of damage, invulnerable, and green variables. And I'm using booleans here. So on event take damage, we bind event on take any damage. We have this. If the damage is more than or equal to 50, then we set taking lots of damage to checked. And after a delay that covers the animation for the anger, we set it back to not checked. And here, if it's false, if it's less than 50, then we are setting taking damage to checked, and after a delay that covers another anger animation to not checked. And this is used by the state machine. We will see it later. Invulnerability. We set invulnerable to checked, and after a delay that is equal to the duration of the effect that we get from our first person character blueprint, and after delay we set it back to none. Same for grin. So you remember, right, we are calling grin when we get the new weapons, and you can use it for other events, of course. So whenever these events happen, we set grin to checked, and after a slight delay we set it to unchecked. And we have wound state, and here we simply cast to the blueprint head. We get owning actor, we cast to blueprint head, and there we get the wound state variable and set it here. We simply transfer basically this variable here, so that we have it here and we don't have to cast there all the time in this state machine. And now let's go to the state machine. It's actually quite simple. If you look at it, you can see that there is a circle going on here. And there is. And these are different states of wounds. Now we have 5 of them, but the 5th doesn't really make I mean, it's just it's when we're dead. The wound state, the animations are the same for no wounds and slight wounds. So we have 4 different kind of nodes to operate from. We have different animations going on from wounded state 1, from wounded state 2, 3, and 4. So if our wounded state is 0 or 1, it's here, we have the appropriate animations for it here. If our wounded state is 2, we use these animations. If it's 3, well, I can see that I made a slight mistake here, and we will fix it now, and you will have this by default this way. Oh no, not this one. And okay, like this. Okay, now I'll rename this. Okay, now everything should be in order. Right. So, on entry, we go here. Here, there is, if we click here, there is a condition that allows us to go further. And the condition is equal or more than 2. So if our wounded state is more than 2 or equal, then we can go here. And when we get here, so even if it was 4, for example, from here we can go on here by this rule, right, which is more or equal to 3, and here, which is more or equal to 4, and we go to this state finally, which is equal to 5. So whatever is our state, we will go, oh, and here we can go back to this state. In this case, we can take a look at it. If the wound state is equal to 0 or equal to 1, because we have the same animations for these 2 states. And there's also, of course, the backwards. So we go backward in case our wounded state is less or equal than 3, less than equal than 2, less or equal than 1. So this creates a circle that works both ways. So whatever is your wounded state, let's say it is 4, then we get some medkits, and we got 100%. Then our wounded state will be updated in the head blueprint, and it will be picked up here in the event graph. And this transition will be opened, and then this transition will be opened, and then this transition will be opened as well. And this will happen instantly. So from here we will get there. So from any point we can get to another point. So this circle creates this thing. And from each of these states we can go to head anger here if we're taking damage. So if taking damage is checked, right? So like in our event graph, we see we're doing this taking damage, right? We were checking it on and off. So here we're taking damage, then we can go is set to is checked, then we're going there, and then we can go back simply by the rule of the sequence. So once the animation has finished playing, it goes back. And grin, same thing, goes back on the sequence there, based on the variable. And just to clarify, here in the event graph, you have to set it back, because if you don't set it back, it will not go. So you first set it to checked, and then after a while you have to check it, to uncheck this. Otherwise it will always be able to go to this animation. And the same for the anger. It's the taking lots of damage. Here in the event graph, here we are just setting taking lots of damage. That is based on the health of our character. And the same for each state. And again, just as an example, we have 100 of health. We're here, then we get minus, we die. This means that our wounded state is set to 5. And it is done in this blueprint here, and then this blueprint here sets this, picks that, and sets our local variable here. Okay, back to the state machine. And so this becomes open because our wounded state becomes more than 2, then here more than 3, here more or equal than 4. This is all of these conditions are satisfied, and here if it's equal to 5, it is, we will get here. And in the middle, these are for the invulnerable state. So from any of those, we have this arrows that has the same condition. So from any of those states, we can get to the state of invulnerability. And from here, we can go out on the condition of not. So if it's if it's not checked, then going back, we can go here. And again, it's not important to which state, because once we get here, depending on our wounded state, we will automatically get to where we need. So this can go anywhere to any of those. We need just one. So I hope this is clear, and it's a little bit complex maybe, but it's actually not that difficult. And the advantage of using an animation blueprint is that all of these transitions, they happen, they have smooth transitions. So going from one animation to another happens smoothly. This is the biggest advantage of the animation blueprint. Without using the animation blueprint the way I tried to set it up at first, whenever you change the state, it would change it right away, and it wasn't possible to make transitions between one state or another, because they could change real fast, and you couldn't really predict how this would happen, and you couldn't have animations for every situation. So to recap, we have this number of variables that are used by this system to switch between the states. And these variables we get from our mostly from our main blueprint. We get the invulnerable from the call from call invulnerable, and here we have call berserk, and the taking damage and taking lots of damage we get from taking damage from our first person character, and the wound state we get from our blueprint head. And that logic of changing these variables is here in the event graph. Is here. So this is taking care of changing these variables, and these variables are taking care of the conditions of transferring between the states. And so in the next video we will take a look at, I think, our characters, the monsters and demons.